Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have with me my friend Mick from Splunk. So, Mick, if you want to introduce yourself, give us a little background.
Sure. My name is Mick Baccio. Thanks for having me again, Tony. It's awesome to be here talking to you again. I am a global security advisor at Splunk on a security research team called Surge, where we just kind of tackle big research projects in the hopes of making security a little better, a little easier, more accessible for everyone out there.
Okay. Well, so you guys, obviously you have plenty of data. That's kind of your thing. But you have this the CISO report,
Mm-hmm.
and I think kind of one of the big takeaways that I saw was budget cuts and those kinds of things. And so, given I don't know, let's just start with kind of your overall sense of the report and kind of what stood out to you.
So for me, I think there were three big takeaways in reading it, and it's full of fantastic stats and data and numbers, and I encourage everyone to go give it a gander and take a peek, because it has the stats that you kind of want to arm yourself with as a security leader to take into the boardroom and be able to translate those things. But yeah, you're 100% right. One of the big takeaways I had was the budget. Right? Budget, compliance, and alignment. I think those are my big takeaways, and we can jump right into budget, right? It is small budget cutbacks lead to big security impacts. And I think that's kind of preaching to the choir. One of the stats I remember reading was 29% of CISOs believe they have enough budget, but 41% of the board think they have enough budget. And that disconnect, I think, is a growing problem. 64% of the boards respond to cybersecurity framed as a business enabler, but less than half the CISOs take that approach. Not having enough budget, I think, has been a pretty constant thing throughout my security career. So when you don't have enough budget, you've got to sacrifice something, and sometimes those sacrifices are critical, like postponed updates, not having the right tooling that you need. And boards justifiably prioritize business growth over security. So presenting security as a business enabler, I think, would resonate a lot more decision makers. And I think CISOs are kind of approaching it with that tack now.
Well, so I actually kind of two thoughts on that. The first one was, when you said justifiably, I'm like, yes, I agree that it is justifiable for boards to prioritize that way, given the, I don't know, given that, that they have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. That said, I personally, as a human being, American citizen, whatever, would love to see a better balance from companies in general of like, yes, if I'm invested in your company, yes, I want you to maximize my return. I want to see some return on my investment, and that's important, but not at the expense of doing what's right. So I think there's a balance, and I don't want to derail the whole thing, because I'm talking about climate change, I'm talking about DEI, I'm talking about all the things. I'm like, just because it costs a little bit of money and eats into your bottom line doesn't make it the wrong thing to do. Sometimes a company should do what's right, even if it costs a few bucks.
It's funny. I went down this rabbit hole with a friend of mine last night, Sean Gallagher, who's an awesome guy. And we talked. Yet I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I am 100% on board. However, right, we're going to have to reevaluate and relook at some legal decisions that have been around for a few decades before any of that changes. Going back to like the Revlon case.
Right.
So I think things like that, until that changes, as a board, I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, right. and I think that's the big problem. For the business end of it, I think, as a CISO, you see cyber threats every day, every minute of every day. So you kind of feel like you're the guardian of the company's future. And you assume that the board's going to see it the same way. And the board, like we said, they're growth, market positioning, shareholder value. There are some boards that look at cybersecurity as just a cost center rather than a strategic enabler unless you get breached. When you get breached, that's your bottom line, that's your reputation. And I think it's that perception gap.
And honestly, I feel like that's, yeah, and I realize I'm biased from where I sit, but I feel like that's inexcusable in 2025. Like I had that conversation in 2005,
And I'll be honest, we probably have it in 2035 too, right? Like I said, until the framework changes, corporations, CEOs, boards operate within the frameworks they're given,
Right.
And it goes back to one of the other points I had was alignment. So, align data protection and budget, but diverge on the focus areas. I think boards and CISOs both agree that data protection's up there, but what should we focus on? The board is going to focus on enablement, regulatory compliance, and the CISOs are in the technical strategies and upskilling.
Right.
It's communication. I think it comes down to better communication, being able to translate from the server room to the boardroom, and that is the language I think CISOs need to adopt more critically as we move forward.
And there's, obviously there has definitely been a shift in the last 20 years of, I think, most cybersecurity professionals and executives have a better understanding of, I'm not here doing security for the sake of security. I'm here doing security to enable business, and so I think security professionals in general have a better recognition of how they fit into the gears of the business. And I think simultaneously, businesses and boards have a better respect for the need for security. So I think it's improved. But as you point out, and as the survey points out, there's obviously still a gap there. And I think,
Right.
And like you point out, like you get breached, all of a sudden your perspective changes entirely. And on the flip side, when I was working in the security trenches, you show up every day, you do your job, and we'd get to the end of a contract with a client, and they'd come to us and be like, we don't know if we need to renew, like nothing ever happens. Like, yeah, nothing happens because you paid me to make sure nothing happens.
But I think that's been a cycle, and I completely agree, right? It's you don't have a budget until you get breached, and then we're going to throw all the money at it. We saw that several times in a lot of large breaches, and if that's what it takes, it's very unfortunate. But to your point, I do think it's getting better. I think security professionals are realizing that security is security, and it's awesome, but we have a business to run. I think it was right around 67 some odd percent. Like CISOs and board members, yep, data protection is critical, but around half the CISOs feel cybersecurity risks are properly addressed, and like 2/3 of the boards do. And I think there's still a disconnect between, hey, as a security professional, I need to address everything. And as a board, I look at it, and the analogy I've used was it's like going to the dentist. You can live your whole life and not go to the dentist and be okay, right? You don't have to implement cybersecurity and you might be okay. But if something happens, it's going to be catastrophic. Like if you don't go to the dentist and that one day you find out, oh, wow, I have 4 teeth missing, that's going to be catastrophic. And I think it's that translation.
Right.
So I think it really comes down to, much like everything else in life, work on your communication, right? Be able to talk to all levels of people in a manner that resonates with them. If I go to a board and start yammering on about, hey, we're 32% patch compliant, we need to make sure, blah, 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 they're going to tune out and look at their next meeting, and understandably so. So I think CISOs, your job has shifted as a CISO, right? You're not just a ones and zeros guy anymore. You're a mediator between departments. You're the campaign manager for your company's security brand. So your responsibilities grow as a CISO, but I think that speaks to the maturity of cybersecurity in general, right? Like
Right.
we're 20 years ago, we're like, hey, nerd, just get in the back room, go to the server room and hang out there. And now I think having a seat at the table is super critical. And I'm excited to see it, but like cybersecurity is always at the kids' table, right? Thanksgiving
Right.
meal, like you're at the kids' table. Now you're at the adult table. You need to start having the adult conversations and realize that your job is security. It's also risk management. And again, going back to the frameworks we have to operate in, cybersecurity might not be the end goal for a lot of organizations. Being secure, yes, cybersecurity is part of that, but it's focusing on the areas that are important to the business.
Yeah. So first, I would say, when it comes to like what a company should do and versus cost savings, you could make similar arguments for fire suppression systems in an office building or whatever. Like a company could go, you know what, we haven't had a fire. We've been here 10 years, never had a fire. Let's take these out. But we have laws in place that say you have to have those. So
and that's the third point, right? So I think the budget cutbacks we talked about, that's my one takeaway. Second takeaway is that CISO boardroom alignment. And the last one, you're 100% right. Like we can't yank out those fire suppression codes because building code says we have to have this. And compliance, I think, is going to be that driver. Is you need to be compliant as a business, as an organization. Otherwise, you're going to be operating in a non-compliant state. You won't be doing business much longer across the globe. It's generally how it works. So I think there's more mandates out there. It's becoming more of a priority for boards. And I know CISOs that I've talked to feel that pressure, but they're not sure if they're meeting the board's expectations, and aligning the boardroom and the server room on that compliance framework. I think that's an essential thing to make cybersecurity step to the forefront. I think what was it, like 69% of board members say compliance pressures have made governance more complex, and 64% of CISOs worry they're not doing enough. But everyone is focused on compliance, because I think more than anything, compliance is the driver that enables you to keep doing business. So compliance first, and then, security. How secure can we be in addition to being on compliance frameworks?
Right. Well, and yeah. So I mean, that's exactly the point I wanted to make. Is like, if there's a mandate, it changes things around. Like you don't get to wait until there's a data breach and then throw money at it if there's a requirement. And in that vein, there's a lot of sort of, I'm going to mix my metaphors, hot potato, kick the can stuff that goes on. Like if I look at like the whole net neutrality debate, I'm going off out in the weeds here, but you have people on one side saying, hey, I've got these libertarian free market views. I don't need the government telling me how to do X, Y, and Z. Just let the market dictate, how things are going to do. And it's like, okay, so then you do that, and then the market just does a bunch of horrible things, which creates the need for the government to step in and say, okay, no, you can't do that. We're gonna police this now, and they want to have it. So they'll say they don't need the government oversight, but then continue to do things that demonstrate that they need the government oversight.
Well, I think that goes back to the overall compliance angle, right? A buddy of mine, Drew Church at Splunk, he's one of my most favorite humans. We have this GRC conversation all the time. As long as I've been in cybersecurity, and I'm dinosaur old doing this, GRC has been the folks that you don't want to admit that they're right? It is, in my opinion, it is boring, painstaking work that you never get enough thanks for. And I think a lot of security professionals, a lot of security practitioners still hold that view. Around half of boards think compliance measures are a key for success. And I think around 15% of CISOs do. So I think if you're not framing compliance as your priority and as the driver, which will enable you to do everything else, hey, if we don't do this, we're not going to be compliant. Hey, if we implement this security measure, we're going to be compliant. And I think framing it from that angle, I think 2025 is the year of GRC shine. It's really good on them.
Well, admittedly, I'm on the fence on compliance. Like I feel like compliance is good. Like most of the compliance frameworks are good. I think where there's a disconnect for me is when it is looked at as, okay, well, we have to do this, so we're going to do what we need to do to be compliant. We're going to check all the boxes. We're going to do the audit or whatever, and now we're going to that's it. Now we're going to pretend we're secure. And it's like, okay,
check all the boxes.
If you are secure, you will probably be compliant. But if you are compliant, it does not mean you are secure.
Yeah, that's been on. I think you're inside my head. The same thoughts I've been having for quite some time is compliance is a framework meant to get you to a baseline, right? You are compliant enough to do business. If security, in addition to compliance, it's that add-on where I can teach you how to cook a steak, right? 6 minutes aside, 4 minutes aside, we're good. What you're going to do in addition to that is going to make your steak great, right? Whatever seasonings you, and I think security and compliance is that same thing. Compliance is the baseline framework. When you look at even things like, we'll go to FedRAMP, right? FedRAMP, low, moderate, high. I want to get to these things. Here's the minimum I have to do. That doesn't mean stop. That just means this is the minimum I have to do. And I think as a security leader, as a CISO, as a security leader, it's your job to be able to make that argument on why you should be doing more. And, if you can't do that, I think you really need to reevaluate the way you're communicating as a leader. If you can't effectively deliver a message that resonates and makes the impact you need it to, start over and try again. Like, don't give up. But
that's very fair. I mean, it kind of brings it back to what you said in the very beginning of the podcast, which is, if I'm the board, compliance is the, that's the bare minimum. That's the, you can't not do that. So yes, I'm going to give you what you need to be compliant. Now, if you're the CISO and you want to do more, well, now you've got to make a business case to me. You got to demonstrate, why would I want to do that? Like, I'm already compliant. I already did what I have to do. So now explain to me the business value of doing something I don't have to do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if you can't make that case to your board, you're not going to accomplish the things that you want to. So I think it's really a moment in cyber as a field and in cybersecurity overall is you're part of the business. You wanted to be part of the business all these years, and now you are. Make it count. Make your voice heard. Learn that you are part of a corporation now. And at the end of the day, corporations are mostly concerned with, hey, can I do business? And you as an enabler of security are finding ways to make that business either more efficient, either make more money, or more secure. More secure is that hard one because, like we were talking about earlier, hey, we didn't get hacked, so what are you doing? Like, how effective was that measure? So I think security leaders, and I'm very, very fortunate to be able to interact with the folks I do. I do see it getting better. I do see, the security nerds I grew up with becoming VPs at organizations and learning the business end of it and learning how to resonate with the boardroom, with the things they want to accomplish, with the measures they want to implement. And again, it's just making your business use case. And I think 5 years ago, most of the security folks I know would be, that's stupid. I don't want to do that. I just want to do security. And that's why you're failing, right? And
well, I mean, when I was doing it back in 2005, I mean, it was kind of security for the sake of, we'd be like, well, no, this is how you be secure. And it was disconnected from, this is how you securely do business.
Right.
And often how you be secure gets in the way of doing business.
100%. Like, throughout my career, I have done this. Like, I have blocked, domains because they were spoofing malware, sending things out, and hey, we can't get to this domain that we need to communicate with the European Parliament. And I'm like, oh yeah, we'll unblock that. And I think it's those things. To your point, security is realizing we are not the end all be all of everything. 100% security means no one can do their job. And if no one can do their job, we're not going to have a business. So I think it's about finding that balance. I don't think any organization I've ever been in is 100% secure. We are secure enough to be compliant. And here are the add-ons, the bells and whistles we implemented to either make us the shiny penny, make us be the example, or let our customers know we take security seriously. And I know that catchphrase you hear all the time, but I think organizations are starting to realize, I need to be more secure in the just from a PR perspective.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna flip this. Like I said at the outset, the thing that kind of stood out to me in the CISO report it is about budget cuts, that disconnect between what the board thinks and what the CISOs think in terms of budget. Now I'm going to flip it around and say, does it all have to be about budget? And I'm going to frame it from the perspective of election cycles. How you get it's thankfully has slowed down quite a bit now that the election's over. But I was getting multiple texts per day and emails saying, hey, this deadline's coming up, we need more money. And every time I would see that, I would think, and I'm kind of a idealist when it comes to democracy. I'm like, it doesn't, having the most money doesn't mean you win. That's not like they always frame it like if they just have the most money, then we'll win. I'm like, that's not how that works, really. And so to bring it back to the CISO budgets. Yes, that's a barometer. That's a metric we can look at and say, okay, are we spending more? Are we spending less? But like spending more doesn't necessarily mean you're more secure.
100%.
And especially now, and this is kind of a third rail issue, but now that we have AI, I know that every single vendor I've talked to for the last 2 years has opened with the line, AI is here, we're going to augment humans, we're not here to replace humans, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, yes, that's true. I understand that that's a it's kind of a legal CYA to some extent.
Right.
We don't want to be the ones saying we're here to take your jobs. But the thing is, in the end, you are eventually like that. That is kind of the goal ultimately. and
I don't disagree, right? Like
I just saw a headline this morning that I don't know where he was speaking. Maybe he was at Davos or something. But Benioff said that they have a hiring freeze at Salesforce, and he said they might not hire any software engineers this year because they're looking at the ways that AI can augment what they're doing, and that's very, very relevant to security too. Like, do I need to spend more money on the humans are one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive part of the whole equation. So if I can do what I need to do with an AI, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. So like going back to the politics part of the election cycles, I was the CISO for Pete Buttigieg and his campaign in 20. And I remember hearing loudly in my ear, hey, Mick, every dollar we spend on security is a dollar we don't spend on votes. And I get that, right? So it's do the best you can with the tools that you have. And I think that is part of your, I guess, innate ability as a security leader to develop that strategy. I always said that I'm trying to build a culture heavy on the cult. And AI, I think, is here to stay. Right? The idea that AI is not going to take jobs, I think might be a bit of a misnomer. I think jobs will be able to be performed through AI functions, no doubt about that. But doesn't that mean that the folks that are in that job become better, become more upskilled, do things that AI can't? And
there's entirely new career fields invented that didn't previously exist. I mean, it's the same as going from horse-drawn carriage to automobile. It's like, well, I don't need you to make wagon wheels anymore, but now I need you to fix engines and carburetors. There are different things to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, 10 years ago, I guess a lot more than 10 now, cloud wasn't really a thing. And now, we've shifted so much. Architecture has shifted so much. If you're the old, on-prem network with my metal and my frames and server racks, I think you are a little bit behind the curve in a cloud-forward world. And I think AI is the same thing. I do think AI is one of the most powerful tools out there and also one of the most dangerous tools out there. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool in the hands of a senior analyst. That's just my take on it. Like, hey, write this code for me. And as a senior, I can go back and kind of, trust but verify and check out things. If I'm on the more junior end, I'm going to take it as gospel because it comes across as so confident. And so I think there's a bit of back and forth on exactly
the
how
same on the content side. I mean, I deal with it on the content side. I mean, I can go on LinkedIn or whatever right now, and I can find you a post and tell you absolutely that was copy and pasted from ChatGPT. Like they didn't edit it. They did that is straight from ChatGPT. And it's like, you
Oh,
can't
they
do
paid for premium. I can tell. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and you can't do that. Like, but the thing is, you also, I think, in 2025 and moving forward, can't not like you need to be using not necessarily ChatGPT, but you need to be using the AI tools because they are a force multiplier. They are a productivity enhancer. So you have to use them, but you have to use them intelligently.
I 100%. And I think we as security nerds want everything to be focused on security. Like, how are we using AI for security? I think one of the best use cases, I did a webinar with a government organization last year, and their big use case for LLMs and for AI was customer service. You know, the little chat bots that you have when you go to a website and want to pay for something or pay your taxes or whatever that looks like, those have grown exponentially better in just the past 18 months. And I know you're going to have the little stunt hacking like, oh, look, I got a discount plane ticket. You're always going to have those one-offs. But I think, you know, instead of having an actual customer service person and have an LLM be able to do that, and it does miss the mark, but I think it's gotten so much better and it's getting better. Those are the kind of use cases I think we'll see more.
Well, and you know, in the broader I don't know, philosophical sense. Like I early on in the generative AI transition, when I had a conversation with someone who said, "Well, you know, we're not going to replace humans," and I said, "Well, I understand that there's a pain, there's a period of pain involved there where like it does start to displace some jobs, and now like what are those people supposed to do? Now they've got to go get retrained. People still have mortgages to pay, they still have to buy groceries, and it's like there's a pain point." But I said, but ultimately I'm looking at this like, you know, Starfleet, Star Trek, Utopia future, you know, whatever. It's like, no, I want the AI to do the jobs, and then I can do something else. I can go, you know, write a book, paint a picture.
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want. But in order for us to get there, we have to get through the pain period, and then there has to be at some point some kind of universal basic income. We have to have some kind of an agreement on, hey, you know, I don't need you to do a job anymore, but you still need a house and food.
Well, I think we're going to start handing out universal basic compute, right? That's the next one. But I think with regard to AI, LLMs in general, you know, the board is going to care about ROI of security investments and regulatory compliance status, right? Far more than I think a lot of folks really take into account. So all the things we want to implement, you know, to make things easier for us, to make things better for us, what's the ROI from a business perspective? And I think that is something that we need to keep sight of when we're implementing all these amazing things that LLMs are able to do for us. But on flip side of that coin, I just read a report on non-human identities, right? Because the LLMs are so integrated, everything, so our APIs, our service accounts, all those things, those non-human identities become really, really critical to secure. And again, it goes back to compliance and security. There might not be a compliance standard for non-human identities, but security leaders will realize the importance of keeping those secure and the business case to be made from that to the board as to why it's important. And I think it's just, again, speaking the language as a security professional that has to translate across all facets of the business is becoming critical as a CISO.
Yeah. Well, so let's kind of bring this back to the report some. I mean, one of the things that's in there, you know, to talk about the benefits of alignment, which you've already addressed, kind of the aligning the CISO with the board, and you know, I actually saw some debate on LinkedIn like this week, some back and forth, where one person posted and said, you know, the CISO needs to be on the board, and then someone else replied and said, no, the CISO, you know, like does not need to be on the board. Like the CISO needs to have a conversation with the board, but. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. I'm not a board person, so I don't know about the nuance of who actually needs to be on the board versus reporting to the board, et cetera, et cetera. But to your point, I mean, obviously there needs to be communication, and the CISO has to be able to make a business case, and it's hard because it's hard to paint a picture of we need to invest in this to avoid this potential outcome, that may or may not ever happen.
Mhm.
But if it does happen, here's the cost. Like, here's our investment to prevent it from happening, and here's the cost if it happens. That's kind of. But you made the point earlier, and I think for me, this is how all of security should be reframed, which is risk management. Like, when I was in the trenches, it was security for the sake of security, and I think that transition in mindset is to understand you're not there to just make everything 100% secure. You're there to identify and mitigate risk, or at least communicate risk so that the board can say, no, we're good, we accept that risk. But as long as you've identified all the risks and communicated them, you've done your job as a security person.
Right. And I think that is where security, I think, is changing so much. Just the field of cybersecurity when it comes to the business environment is, hey, we are not secure. We're not security nerds for the sake of being security nerds. We're here to manage the organization's risk. And when it gets to that line, it's the CISO's role, it's the security leader's role to make that case. We are this compliant, we are this secure. However, if something happens, here's how much money we will lose. Or if we implement this is how we'll streamline the organization over the course of months, days, years, whatever that looks like. And I think framing it that way, being able to mitigate or manage the risk, right? Your job as a CISO when you're speaking with the board, hey, this is the risk. Somebody make a decision. Here's all the facts that we have. And if they want to put in a technical control and accept that risk, we're good to go. That's just, and I think security, I know for me, I had a hard time accepting that at first, where, hey, we're not going to do that. It's going to take too long and cost too much money. And, cybersecurity nerd, no, but we'll be less secure then. And I think the conversation is much different now. And I think cybersecurity as an industry, as a whole, has gotten so much more mature and so much more aligned with understanding that we're a business now. And that's fantastic to see. And I hope it continues. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that alignment with the security and the leadership is the CISOs in the boardroom. It's finding that common language.
Okay. Well, so what, if you had some, I don't know, top three recommendation suggestions, if you were having a conversation with the CISO, what would be your sort of recommendations, for how to take what's in this report and turn it into action?
I think it's going to vary business to business, right? I think, depending on what framework you're going to fall under, whether it's GDPR, CCPA, NIST, or FISMA, whatever that looks like for your organization, find out what your organization's pain points are, find out, what their tolerances are, and make that business case. I think it's like I said earlier, it's translating from the server room to the boardroom. Your communication skills as a security leader have never been more important than they are in the coming years. Budgets, I don't think budgets will get, no one, I've yet to meet an organization. Yep, our security budget is super awesome. We have all the things we need. We have all the things to do. But I think as a security leader, your job is to develop that strategy where, hey, if we don't have the money for this, here's how we piecemeal it together. Here's how we develop it inside. Here's the alternative that we can do to keep us as secure. And presenting that to the board, understand that, ROI is going to be the biggest measurement.
Yeah. Well, and, along those lines, earlier I said, money isn't everything. Maybe you can just, invest in AI, but also money isn't everything. Sometimes you already have, I think a lot of times companies look at, when they get breached. A company gets breached, the first thing they want to do is give a blank check and say, well, go buy the tool that would have prevented this breach. Which is, complete. Here's some money. Go close the barn door after the horse already escaped. But along those lines, I used to go to I would go to clients who had been breached, and come in after the fact, and they would do that. They would say, okay, well, what do we need to buy? And I'd say, well, hold up, let's start by understanding what exactly happened and what tools do you already have in place. Maybe you maybe it's a configuration thing, maybe it's a policy thing, maybe you've got the tools you need already and you're just not using them properly. Like, it's not a function of let's just go buy a tool and it's going to magically solve everything.
Right. I 100% agree. I think at some point your strategy as a cybersecurity leader comes into play. You can have all the tools, you can capture all the packets, you can do all the things, but if you're not implementing your strategy the right way, then you're going to fail. And that was my big knock against automation for the longest time, and it kind of still is a little bit. I think automation is critically important when we start looking at how much data the average bear sees on an average day. It's a lot. It's too much for the human eye to comprehend and process. So automation comes into play, and it should. But automation just speeds up your processes. So if your processes stink, you're just going to fail faster. And that's why I think your strategy, your process, that becomes super critical as a security leader. So, it's different than it was 5-10 years ago. It's different than it was 15 years ago. I think it's super awesome to see cybersecurity grow so much. But I think that cybersecurity leaders have maybe lagged behind a little bit on the understanding the business aspects of it. And I do see that changing. I think the CISO report, like 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had a CISO report, right? So now that we have one, it's awesome to see. And I hope folks out there take advantage and read the data that's out there.
Awesome. All right. I think we're good. And it's always fun to chat with you.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me again, Tony. I appreciate it. Anytime you want to wrap, I'm here.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.